Good morning. The first item of business is general questions, and at question number 1 I call Tim Eagle.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on how it is engaging with communities based near the Murray Firth regarding the proposed Murray Flow Park project.
Cabinet Secretary Gillian Martin.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Scottish Government manager sees, in line with the National Marine Plan, promoting sustainable development which accounts for existing sea users and protection of our marine environment. I'm aware of the strong public concerns about the proposed Murray Flow Park and recognise the importance of engagement with local communities, including the fishing industry. As we've previously explained, this project remains at an early stage, with exploratory activities being undertaken by the developer, which I understand involves them engaging with the local community and other interested stakeholders. While no marine licence applications have been submitted by the developer or any other party, any future application will be subject to the relevant rigorous regulatory processes, which include pre-application consultation and formal public consultation. This will ensure that, should an application be submitted, local communities and stakeholders will have the opportunity to provide their views, which will be taken into consideration as part of any application.
Tim Eagle.
Presiding Officer, local people are furious about this and the proposed location, and FOI documents that have recently come out make clear why. They show that the Scottish Government was behind this from the start, with Scottish Enterprise bankrolling Offshore Solutions Group with a £1.83 million grant, more than £800,000 of that already spent, despite no consent, no environmental assessments, no procurement processes and no meaningful community engagement. Now, Scottish Enterprise even said the project had to be pushed at pace because any delivery was a critical risk to the SNP's renewable plans. Imagine how that sounds to local residents and fishermen who were never asked for this project. Given the seriousness of this, I will be requesting a ministerial statement later today, but can the Minister, this Cabinet Secretary, explain to my constituents why their livelihoods and public money were put at risk before communities were even consulted?
Cabinet Secretary.
I just want to make clear, when Scottish Enterprise gives funding or indeed advice to any developers, it has absolutely no implication in the planning process whatsoever. They do not need planning permission to be in place before they engage with developers or indeed any companies. Scottish Enterprise make their own decisions on where funding is given and for what reasons, and they do this around a range of developments. I would suggest that when a marine licence application is submitted, whether it is submitted, that's the point at which the local communities and stakeholders will have an opportunity to air their views. But I would also say that for any developers, regardless of the specific example, any developers that want to put forward an application, that they engage with the community thoroughly and ahead of their application.
Question number 2, Pauline McNeill.
To ask the Scottish Government how it is tackling the increase in demand for ADHD assessments in Glasgow.
Minister Tom Arthur.
The Scottish Government recognises that demand for ADHD assessment and support has increased significantly in recent years. We also understand that a diagnosis can be helpful for people seeking support with ADHD. That should not, however, be a substitute for providing support to people based on their specific needs. We are working closely with NHS health boards and local authorities to improve services and support for neurodivergent people. While the responsibility sits with NHS boards and health and social care partnerships to ensure funding is used to provide the highest quality of care and support, the Government is playing an active role in supporting this work nationally. For example, we fund the National Autism Implementation Team to support health boards and HSCPs to redesign neurodevelopmental services and develop stepped care pathways for ADHD and autism.
Pauline McNeill.
Thank you. My 23-year-old constituent was on the ADHD waiting list in January 2023, and she was told we would be around 18 months to wait. But there hasn't been much contact with her, but last week she called to find out when she'd be seen. Now, she was told, well, she certainly wouldn't be seen before 2027, so that's going to be at least 3 years of her life. So I wonder if the Minister can help me here in trying understanding why the waiting time would have expanded so much. You can correct me on this, but I think that patients are taken in order. There's not a priority given, it's not triaged. So I'm wondering why it could expand to so long. And is the Minister concerned that my constituent's not really getting a straight answer? And can he ensure me that at least there will be transparency for NHS patients to understand when they will get seen?
Minister.
Well, firstly want to say that long waits are not acceptable, and if Polly McNeill wants to write to me and provide me details of a constituent, I'm more than happy to look into that directly and come back to her in writing and obviously follow up with a meeting if that would be useful. More generally, what we are seeing is significant demand for neurodevelopmental assessment and support. This, of course, is not an issue that is unique to Scotland. Members may be aware of the announcements that have been made south of the border, reflecting significant pressures that have been experienced in England, and there's a similar picture in Wales as well. There is a lot of work that the government is undertaking at the moment. Indeed, Parliament's been engaged in this as well. The Health Committee has been undertaking an inquiry, and I look forward to reading the report that the Health Committee produces. There will also be a cross-party summit. Invitations have been sent out to respective party spokespeople, and I'm looking forward to that summit taking place. But this is a complex and challenging issue. It has been characterised as a wicked problem, and we're going to have to work constructively to identify long-term solutions. But that has to be based upon need, and I want to stress the importance that a diagnosis should not be required to access support. And I'm committed to working constructively with partners to make sure that's a reality. But in the specific case, if Polly McNeill wants to write to me with the details, I'll be happy to get back to her.
Question number 3, Paul Sweeney.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what its response is to the Centre for Cities' recent report, which recommended having a directly elected Metro Mayoralty for the Greater Glasgow region.
Deputy First Minister.
Well, growing the economy is a top government priority, and we agree with the Centre for Cities that further empowering regions is key to delivering that. As the First Minister announced last week, we'll introduce legislation in the next Parliament to enable regional partnerships to establish legal status and to unlock new powers. Our approach will be dynamic, working with regions to design structures that suit them, because there is no one-size-fits-all. And indeed, the new research from the University of Glasgow Centre for Public Policy recommends moving away from assumptions that appointing mayors is the best approach.
Paul Sweeney.
Thank the Deputy First Minister for her answer. At last Friday's State of the City Economy conference in Glasgow, the First Minister did promise that the Government would introduce enabling legislation in the next Parliament to allow regional partnerships to seek legal status, unlock new powers and design delivery models tailored to local priorities. But with further details yet to be provided, this seems to be one of the biggest changes, nonetheless, to Scottish Government since the creation of this Parliament, finally filling the strategic gap that has been present in Scotland since the abolition of the regional councils in 1996. But does the Scottish Government plan to facilitate a greater level of democratic mandate for this new city-region tier of governance? Are we going to end up with a feeble version of England's combined authority system, with some of the executive powers but none of the democratic accountability?
Deputy First Minister.
Can I welcome Paul Sweeney's recognition of the steps that the First Minister has laid out? I very strongly believe, in my first statement, I said that no one size fits all. And I think it does need to be a more dynamic approach. And whilst it's very interesting to learn some lessons from some of the greater authorities, I know Manchester is often referenced, it's quite clear that their approach to development and planning is dynamic. And it's that dynamic approach that we want to adopt, rather than being just drawn to a single democratic or constitutional approach to these areas. So we will lay out more steps. It needs to be a flexible approach. The approach that is taken for Glasgow may not be the same approach, for example, that would be taken to Aberdeen. And I think it's that dynamic approach which we are keen to see adopted.
Jamie Hepburn.
In a similar vein to Paul Sweeney's question, in taking forward the Scottish Government's legislative plans, might the Deputy First Minister give consideration to enabling the City region to consider the idea of establishing a directly elected council or assembly to better ensure democratic oversight and governance for the region?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, we will work with regional partnerships to establish governance structures that work for them. Just to illustrate my point, and I know it's outside Jamie Hepburn's area, but in some regional partnerships are already aligned with a single local authority, making it easier to match the governance structure with the regional partnership. That may look different for areas like Glasgow, and as I said in my original answer, that does not necessarily mean appointing mayors. So the views of local government will inform any future changes to local government structure or governance arrangements. That's in line with our commitment to respecting local government's democratic mandate as part of the Verity House Agreement.
Question number 4, Keith Brown.
to ask the Scottish Government what its response is to the UK Government budget announced on the 26th of November.
Cabinet Secretary Shona Robertson.
The UK budget process has been chaotic and failed to deliver for Scotland. We needed to see the UK Government prioritising investment in public services, support for jobs and industry in Scotland and serious action on energy bills. Instead, Scotland was again treated as an afterthought, with families left to pay the price. Abolishing the two-child limit is of course welcome but long overdue, and of course this government was already taking forward plans to mitigate it in Scotland. We're now looking carefully at what the UK budget means for Scotland and our own budget, which will be published on the 13th of January.
Keith Brown.
Given the IFS warning that this budget bakes in austerity for the years ahead, that's to say the Labour budget bakes in austerity for the years ahead, what assessment has the Scottish Government made of the pressure this will place on Scotland's public services, especially when the so-called funding uplift doesn't even cover half the cost of the national insurance rise forced on employers this year? And with a real terms increase of only 0.8%, granted because Anis Sarwar asked us to, does the Cabinet Secretary agree with me that this demonstrates not influence but ineffectiveness and a complete lack of ambition on the part of Anis Sarwar, that he has asked for far too little and that once again Scotland has been treated, as the Cabinet Secretary says, as an afterthought by the UK Government?
On devolved responsibilities, Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I absolutely agree with Keith Brown. The UK Government has made much of the very limited additional funding provided, but of course that stretches across 5 years and, as Keith Brown has pointed out, is less than half the shortfall in funding for the increased cost of employers' national insurance contributions faced by our public services, estimated to be around £2 billion across the 5-year period. Now, I had called for significant investment in public services and infrastructure, but this UK budget failed to deliver the scale of funding that we need, and that means, of course, we continue to face a very challenging outlook as we head into the Scottish budget.
Question number 5, Murdo Fraser.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government what recent assessment it has made of the impact of the visitor levy on businesses operating in the hospitality and tourism sectors.
Minister Ivan McKee.
The Scottish Government recognises the importance of supporting Scotland's visitor economy while enabling councils to invest in local services. The Visitor Levy Act requires local consultation with businesses before any scheme is introduced. Responding to feedback from industry and others earlier this week, we lodged a GIQ signalling our intention to bring forward a bill early in the new year to provide additional flexibility, such as allowing flat-rate models as an alternative to the current percentage-based approach. If passed, this bill will further enable councils to design fair and practical schemes, protecting the competitiveness of our hospitality and tourism sector and generate revenue to support local tourism economies.
Murdo Fraser.
I thank the Minister for his response, and can I very much welcome the dramatic U-turn we've had from the Scottish Government to allow councils extra flexibility in future, following sustained pressure from the Scottish Conservatives and from the tourist industry. But in the meantime, of course, councils are continuing to progress plans for a visitor levy, including in Perth and Kinross, part of the region I represent, where a public consultation disclosed 68% opposition to a visitor levy and just 29% in favour. Given that overwhelming rejection of the notion of a visitor levy in Perth and Kinross, would the Minister join with me in calling on SNP and Liberal Democrat councillors on the Council now to ditch plans and to join with Conservative councillors in calling for them to be put in the bin where they deserve to be?
On matters of devolved responsibility?
I have to salute Murdo Fraser's for being a trier, if nothing else. The Government listens and engages with the industry on an ongoing and regular and thorough basis, and as we do, as our responsible Government listens to concerns and makes changes to legislation when that is in the best interest of all concerned, both business and local government. It obviously is up to local authorities, as it rightly should be, to take forward any proposals that they have for what best suits their local economies and their local tourism sector through following engagement with businesses and other interested parties. And it's not the role of this Government to tell local authorities how best to run that process. We are making available to them a range of options, and they can decide on the best way to proceed based on those local circumstances.
Question number 6, Jamie Halker-Johnston.
To ask the Scottish Government when the Cabinet Secretary for Transport last met with local communities over the future of the Corran Narrows crossing.
Cabinet Secretary Fiona Hislop.
I last met with the local stakeholders and community members in August 2023 at Ardgour Howell in Ardgour, along with the local MSP Kate Forbes, to discuss Corran Ferry matters, including ongoing issues and impacts at the time. The Corran Ferry is the responsibility of Highland Council, who run the service. The Scottish Government agreed to include funding for the Corran Ferry replacement vessel in a revision to the Highlands City deal at their request, and Transport Scotland and Scottish Government officials continue to engage regularly with the Highland Council and other partners on the investments in vessel and port infrastructure.
Jamie Halker-Johnston.
Thank you. The Scottish Government can't just wash their hands of this issue. This is one of the busiest ferry routes in Scotland, and local communities are losing faith in the Scottish Government and in SNP-led Highland Council. The MV Corran has experienced serious reliability issues, and its backup vessel, the Maid of Glencoe, is so old she's just been added to the Register of Historic Vessels. I was in Fort William last week, and local people were clear the impact on their communities is significant. They don't care whether or not it's an electric vessel. They just want a reliable new vessel as soon as possible, even if it's a replacement diesel ferry, and a fixed link in the longer term. So why isn't the SNP listening to them?
Cabinet Secretary.
I'm not sure the member listened to my first answer. Actually, the Scottish Government has taken on board the request from Highland Council, has ensured that there's provision and funding for a replacement Corran Ferry, and as part of that, the Caledonian Maritime Assets Limited CMAL is developing the concept design and has been prepared for the new electric ferry with a tender specification ready for submission to a shipbuilder. So far from not being involved, the Highland Council have taken on their responsibility, the Scottish Government has taken on their responsibility, and I'm looking forward to the Corran Ferry being one of the first vessels in the SVRP Phase 2 vessel replacement.
Question number 7, Jackie Dunbar.
To ask the Scottish Government what its response is to the UK Government budget regarding how it affects the North East Scotland region.
Cabinet Secretary.
This UK budget has failed to deliver for Scotland and will have detrimental effects for the North East region. We are deeply disappointed and concerned that the UK Government has failed to reform the Energy Profits Levy, ignoring both our warnings and those from industry. This places jobs, investment and the energy transition itself at risk. Also, the North East distilleries are crucial to the whisky industry, and industry contributing over £5 billion in exports and over 20,000 jobs. The disparity in alcohol duty has been ignored again, with rates being increased, resulting in an 18% rise in just 3 years.
Jackie Dunbar.
Just days after the budget was published, we have seen another 100 jobs losses announced by Harbour Energy in Aberdeen. The Energy Profits Levy is taxing a windfall that no longer exists and which is devastating Aberdeen's economy. So can I ask the Cabinet Secretary what the Scottish Government is doing to encourage the UK Government to rethink the EPL?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I share the member's concern about the job losses announced at Harbour Energy in Aberdeen and the approach taken to the reserved North Sea fiscal regime in the UK budget. The Chancellor has not heeded the very clear warnings from across the energy industry on the necessity of making the transition from the Energy Profits Levy to a fairer, more stable regime as soon as possible. The impacts are being felt acutely in the North East, including the further job losses highlighted by the member. These impacts extend across the energy sector, including renewables and supply chains. We will continue, of course, to relay these concerns to the UK Government in the strongest possible terms.
Douglas Lumsden.
Presiding Officer, the UK budget was a hammer blow to the North East of Scotland and the oil and gas industry, but it's now nearly 3 years since the Scottish Government announced their presumption against oil and gas. And in that time, they've refused to support Rosebank, refused to support Campbell and refused to support Jackdaw. Now, this SNP Government is complicit in thousands of jobs being lost in the North East. So will the Government commit to publishing its energy strategy and just transition plan before the end of the year and finally show some support to our oil and gas workers?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, of course, we didn't support the extension to 2029 under the previous Tory UK government of the Energy Profits Levy, nor...
Let's hear the Cabinet Secretary.
I'm not sure they quite heard that, Presiding Officer, so let me say again, we didn't support either the extension to 2029 under the previous Tory UK government, nor the further extension to 2030 and the increase in rate confirmed at last year's UK autumn budget. This is having a devastating effect on the sector in the north east of Scotland and in the rest of Scotland, and it needs to be scrapped, and it needs to be scrapped now.